Всем привет!
Hi.
С вами снова
Again, Track Vision, Alexei Vishnyakov. We had a break. I think you are ready to continue. So all of us are happy, you are smiling, that's good, and we can continue. So, technical executions will follow. We have new participants here. We continue talking about disclosure or detection of hackers and evasion of detection from their part. We're talking about SIEM solutions. We have Vladislav Lashkin, head of department, anti-cyber department in Solar Forest, and Ms. Nikulina, head specialist of the detection center OC Technologies. So, from the very beginning, let me begin with the most trivial, the most understandable problem that may occur. What if, within the real situation, when SIEM looks at different events which come from here and there, when SIEM stops getting those events, what if hacker affects it and starts attacking at the level of data collection? Vladislav, begin please. From the viewpoint of a hacker, what they can start doing to blind the SIEM system. So today we're going to talk about Windows, basically. Let's start from the obvious thing. One of the first and the most loud things is stop event log. And of course, there are a lot of things like that. You can cut it through PowerShell, through the register. So what are we going to do? Well, as you say, in your question, there is an answer. Those techniques are very noisy. Not only the attacker knows about it, the defenders are not dumb. They know such methods. The defenders are well aware of them, they can disclose them, they have detects, and everything is covered quite well. Through SC, through PowerShell, event log can be stopped. Yes, and we can easily detect it through command line, for instance. We have event launch and command line. Through command line, we can easily see it. Also, you can stop the service 7036. Of course, we shall see it as well, if it happens. If we don't look at specific techniques, but talk about the general situation when events are not coming in any normal SIEM, there is a monitoring functionality, source monitoring function. If all of a sudden all telemetry is stopped, we have to learn about it. Health checks must go on, and it should be done not by the detector, by the specialist, but the product itself should alarm us. Yes, that there is a problem that health checks are not periodical, and while the next health check will take place, the hacker can do a lot of things before the next health check. And of course, the logs can be edited, and we have to do forensics as a result. Of course, log carving, forensics, but that's clear. Now, let us look at the non-standard things, less noisy. For example, in Wolfenton, a tool that doesn't stop logging, it goes to the logging host and suspends or stops all the data flows in charge of logging. We don't have, the service is not stopped, but we shall have no logs. Yes, Phantom is a good tool. We looked at it, and in the logs you cannot detect it. But we have other solutions for monitoring. Well, let's look at invoke Phantom. It has to go to the memory of the process with privileged rights, not only read rights, but read and write rights. If we have sysmon, we can monitor sysmon 10, we can monitor the target process, SVC host, and when somebody gets access with extended rights, we shall see that event. If we have ED agents, it's even easier. We can build our detect. Well, that's a dream. A dream, yes, of course, why not? EDR events, invoke Phantom is not going to work, but we still can detect the event. Well, also we can patch the ETV function, ETV write event, or what is the correct name, the function, which is in charge of logging in CTLV. We can, if somebody collects ETV events for .NET, we first can block the logging of those events, and then nothing can be disclosed. You said about patch. It will be a process memory change. Our solution for monitoring can detect process memory changes with the functions that you mentioned. So we shall detect it. Of course, these are the advanced techniques. If you want to detect advanced techniques, then you must have advanced detection methods on top of normal Windows tools. If you detect it, you can alert it in SIEM, and then an incident will be created, a correlation with other event, and we shall learn about that event. Perhaps, well, let me interfere and add something. Look, we have a very interesting point here for those who are with us from the very first presentation. They may have a question. Why now we see the same words? We see the same words or similar words. For instance, on the one hand, in the context of what we discussed before, and in the context of SIEM that we're talking now, there are common problems. And we observe that both try to overcome those problems with the help of different solutions. But you said that as soon as something becomes advanced, very much advanced, you expect some other products, advanced products. Why don't you use EDR? Why you live with that? Why you fight with that? Since the problem can be delegated to other people, why it's your problem still? It's a rhetorical question, it's a philosophic question. Let us think about it, but we shall move to another topic. Let's talk about detection methods. which help us to do more. Events operate normally as expected. How can hacker affect the existing methods? First, the question is to you. Please tell us, what could hackers or attackers do without interfering with events? And then we shall listen to another party. Well, let me tell you in general about obvious things in the context, of course. I have two detection methods at SIEM: correlation rules by signature and by behavior. Both have positive and negative points. Signatures change. Behavior is not precise enough. It has a lot of false positives. Signatures are based on keywords, hashes, all that sort of thing. And here, there is a question. We have an attacker, for example, who can simply rename a utility and change the signature and use the same malware under a different name. What can you do? Well, actually, detecting logic depend on completeness of telemetry. What kind of telemetry do you get? Extended audit of Windows? No, you will fail if you collect events broader. Then you'll get a larger context, a broader context. Hash of executive file, metadata, original name. If you rename the malware, you can see it by metadata or by existing metadata or by deleted metadata, which is also an indication. I'm talking about SysMon data. Security specialists, when they use SysMon 1, sometimes forget about such fields: original name, metadata, and it's a pity because they can detect all that. Yes, I quite agree with you. Well, so you have answered the question about the signature, including my subsequent questions. Signature is precise, exact, but very dumb and yes, Pyramid of David Bank. Well, it's clear. Now let's pass over to the top of the pyramid, behavior rules, which are not precise, but they can find everything or much of those things that signature methods miss. For example, well, you said that. Let me repeat again. You have utilities that are authorized by keys, standard, non-standard. They are authenticated by keys. And the problem is that the keys can be changed, mixed. There are a lot of non-documented keys, and all that is exploited. We see such flags from time to time. And what can we do? Oh, yes, that's a well-known problem and a headache. You have to be very accurate. So in your command lines, the hacker will hardly invent something brand new which nobody knew before. In 95% of cases, it will be a well-known method, and the blue teamer can research the subject and in your regular expression take it into account so that no one can use hidden alliances, minus C, blah, 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 like that. And another idea is that if you cannot take into account everything, you can also use other events. For example, if you see a script, something happened as a result. The hacker affected the event and generates some telemetry. Look at the picture in its complexity. Don't focus on one detect only. No, look at the general picture, wide picture. Yes, so telemetry should be sufficient because sometimes we lack telemetry, we miss some things. Unfortunately, some audits were missing, some files were missing. Yes, in PowerShell, for instance, if crypto logging is activated, the hacker will be seen and detected. True. Yes. Okay. Then next story. Next story, which is often seen, it's about interconnections, interactions, detecting. For example, we have a process, and this process launched another process, correlation logic. We often link those processes by pits, not by name. The pit, one process, second process with the pits, but this, and for example, pit can be changed after some time. Let's talk about your techniques, but I would like to tell you more about this story. For example, the chain is broken and we didn't detect the break, but then the hacker will do something else that is not the first and the last activity. He will do something else on top of it. He breaks the chain to do something more. All right, we didn't detect it, and if we detect everything, we wouldn't be discussing here. Everything will be all right. He will do something else, and we shall detect him later. Of course, we can solve that problem at the SIEM side by event kernel processes. Well, no, ETV, but let's even skip it. If monitoring of the final point can provide you with telemetry where process start gives you the true launcher, not this changed launcher, EDR again. Let's move at one level higher. Let's look at the stories where behavior was based on, how to put it better, on detects from products of a different layer, and the hacker tries to affect the process indirectly, so that an event that is expected would come in a changed way or didn't come at all. And then the correlation of SIEM the SIEM detection correlation will not detect it because it will not have sufficient data. And the hacker will bypass SIEM by cutting the data and making them insufficient. Do you have any examples of that case when we expect something at the SIEM aggregator, we expect behavioral detect based on predication of low-level products. Maybe it's a two-step process, a three-step process, so that the required EDR or network analyzer would be involved. Well, let me give you an indirect example. SIEM resources are finite. We build our logic on something recorded in a certain log or list, and depending on that, we build some logic. For example, in packet, which can be detected by correlation of network session with typical behavior. At highly loaded servers, we can have a list that will be overflown, and a certain record will be deleted too early. What about best practices? What can we do? Did I get you right that something is recorded locally and then it is deleted? No, it's about SIEM. Different rules and lack of resources force us to delete. First come, first deleted. So you need more space, more memory, more disks. You can keep it in SIEM and set up timers properly. Of course, SIEM resources are not unlimited. They are limited. They are not unlimited. They are limited. And then you can record it on disks, but disks are also limited. So what? We can optimize it one way or the other. If we cannot do anything about it, then admit that you cannot do anything, and let's try to detect other events. So extend memory or use something else. Or we can fix this question, because at the next discussion we're going to come back to that question and discuss it, because it's interesting. And of course it goes to the next level of discussion. I believe the problem that you touched now, SIEM cannot solve, because SIEM was not developed for that. And all the power of all kind of engines cannot solve that problem at all. It's a very good story anyway, and we are going to discuss it later. I have another question to you. Look, SIEM is an aggregator of everything. It gets a huge number of raw data just in case it may happen, or just somebody forgot to switch off, or somebody tested something and didn't switch off the test. Then you get positives, true and false, and there is an analyst trying to find out what to do next. So the analyst has everything he needs, but the volume is too huge. He cannot digest it. What can a hacker do to exaggerate that situation And what the security center will do, it's up to you. The poor analyst has such a huge number of data, volume of data, that hacker can easily go on. First thing today is to try to behave in the way that many other good users behave. It's in fact, you look at behavior, and what can we do? It's a mimicry. If he behaves seemingly like others, mimicry has its limits as well. As a minimum, in any company, you have a lot of processes and rules of internal interaction, using different kinds of software. Internal processes are well known to employees, but external people must spend a lot of time to learn those processes. A newly coming hacker cannot do it. Yes, but it may happen at a certain stage. Initially, the hacker will make a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors. That's my personal opinion. So you cannot have an ideal crime. The hacker will make a mistake somewhere. He cannot imitate legitimate user 100%.
Не потому что хакер такой красавчик и такой молодец, а потому что, допустим, у нас нету нужной телеметрии.
Sometimes we don't have telemetry, we don't have enough logic, we don't have good monitoring processes, and then the hacker can penetrate somehow. But we don't have an ideal hacker who can imitate a legitimate user. One hacker error is sufficient for us to detect.
Челленджа на то, что вот сейчас я возьму как как вам придумаю тут chain атаки.
Still, I can sit down, invent a chain attack, and then look how you are going to detect it. But well, let me tell you the following. One error is enough to detect the cyber criminal. I don't quite agree. The question is not about telemetry. It's not about rules. It's also about human factor. Because unfortunately, very often, bad forensic investigation leads to the situation when, being isolated at one host, the hacker continues operating at other hosts. Human factor should be taken into account as well. Well, you have to do with the human factor then. Why SOC analytic misses takes true positives for false positives. Of course, there is fatigue, continuous stress, well, and the analyst starts ignoring true positives. If he has a lot of similar positives, he loses sensitivity. The level of sensitivity to those positives gets down, and you have to do something about it. send them to the Bahamas. No, different ways. For example, a regular white listing, a regular tuning of box rules, repository rules, logical rules, continuous adaptation of the rules to your infrastructure, because vendor detectives are always written for an abstract, general situation. And the situation can be different in different infrastructures.
Moreover, the infrastructures, they are not static, they are dynamic. Some new software may emerge, and new service may emerge, the rules of interaction may emerge, and the rules which do not give us false signal may give a false signal now. So this is a matter of tuning and white listing. It has to be very regular, it has to be a continuous process. This is the main way to fight against the alert fatigue and the false
Тут, наверное, тогда
triggering.
история про человеческий фактор. Ты уже вначале говорил,
Another case about the human factor. You said in the very beginning that the criminals, they are not fools, and they see what might be detected and what rules are there in the open source. And this is not just an arbitrary question, and you already answered that. This is about tuning and whitelisting, but I assumed that we have a lot of different databases, Sigma, etc. And these rules have been written by the community.
Практически ни подо что. И, наверное, существует ситуация, в которой эти правила просто берутся.
And there are some situations when those rules would be adapted for the situation and everything looks nice, and we have a lot of rules that we have taken from somewhere. And the criminals have access to those bases in general. And I think that they see what is being used, and they would try to find loopholes. Well, if I put myself in their shoes, I would do the same. This is a problem of a human factor. In order to adapt the rules, you have to look at the infrastructure, test it, try it.
Это вообще отдельная сложная история. И уже потом думать, а стоит ли это приземлять, то есть как гипотезу, наверное.
Whether it can be implemented, so it can be taken as an assumption, but not as a working story. Probably this is not the right way to do. This is back to a question about the human factor. I have no objections. That was an ideal thing. So we have coincided ideally.
Мы пришли к какому-то общему знаменателю. У меня есть еще две интересных темы.
We have two more interesting topics.
Знаете, из серии страданий, а вторая,
One is about our sufferings, and the second one is about the experience and laughter at the same time.
Вот. Есть, значит, такая вот сущность нашей жизни, называется...
For instance, there is such a phenomenon in our life, which is called UEBA.
Не так, да, тебе говорят?
Well, it's her own name, at least as I was told.
Эксперты, практикующие специалисты...
Really experts and practitioners call that UEBA, and always they are very inspired about how it sounds in Russian. Whether UEBA has anything to do with the SIEM and how it all works, why we need that, and most importantly, where here hackers may impact what is going on, and whether it helps those who are on the defensive end. Tell us more about UEBA. I cannot tell you more about the UEBA because I never laid my hands on it, but out of what I know about that, I can frankly tell you. In terms of the in-house and SOC, where the organization has the necessary resources and time in order to fine-tune that and to test that, check that when anyone moves somewhere within the departments. If you have time for that, that's great. And probably at some scope, it may work. But I do not believe in that decision solution, but I more opt for the MDI solution. How we can cheat it?
Глобальной мысли-то у меня тоже здесь нет, но разве что прикинуться пользователем, там, поизучать его каким-то образом.
You can mimic a user, study his job description. For instance, you may hack some administrator of 1C in order to have a look at what is there in 1C database, steal some job descriptions. But I think that UEBA is not good there because the user actually does what he is supposed to do.
Ну, смотри, Влад, тут мы с тобой совпали опять. Ура.
Vlad, I can only echo what you have said.
Отношусь к классическим УЕБА-системам, да, то есть классическая УЕБА-система, я подразумеваю то, что это...
I have the same attitude towards the conventional UEBA. This is the user-centric system, and there are non-conventional systems which are event-centric.
У них, на мой взгляд, перспектив поболее.
In my opinion, they are more promising. Regarding the story about
как можно защититься,
how we can get secured, it depends on how the model is being built, depends on the structure. For instance, in order to detect some abnormally, you have to somehow glue in two events, the network one and the other one. So at the processing level, before the data is populated, the system has to be able to process that and to glue them. How we can bypass that? Actually, I actually think more not about how to secure ourselves against that, but how to bypass that. You spoke about profiling groups, and it may be subjected to low and slow attacks when the criminal penetrates into the network and doesn't do anything malicious and step by step would develop its activity. Why I think it could work? Because UEBA is not sounding alarm for every event, otherwise actually it won't be any help for the analytics who are overloaded with the tasks. It works within certain safety margins, so there is a kind of a corridor and certain deviation would be considered to be normal within certain margin. And if the criminal works slowly, then this assumption, this margin would accumulate, and at the end of the day, when some serious attack is being done, then UEBA would consider it to be normal. It would not alert us. But I can respond to myself. I'm working to capacities now, as you see, and have a rest. I will do the talking. The criminal cannot procrastinate the attack because their resources are limited and time is limited, and the criminals cannot slow down to the maximum. I'm not sure whether it would work properly. So let the criminals try it and then anonymously inform us about that. Well, let me get back the picture that our audience liked most. So I have a question.
Вот эти всякие там ML-ные решения, уж на чем они там центричные, да?
Well,
в работе написание...
Those systems have to work, the analysts, at least the top-level logics or rules. For instance, a person did that and undertaken that, and it was normal, but then something abnormal has happened, and we suspect some abnormality and issue an alert. In your opinion, it's more a question about the experience. Do you think that really there are no chances that such cases could be fixed with a habitual set of rules, where, for instance, it doesn't make sense to use the aggregators. An analyst, for instance, may have a more general view, working not with the basic events, but with some top-level events or a bigger context.
не удается напрямую как-то скоррелировать, связать между собой.
And for instance, if you work with the events that cannot be connected between each other,
Где сначала есть какие-то легитимные действия, только потом подозрительные действия, и вот в этом происходит сигнатурная аномалия как таковая.
and there might be a signature abnormally. Do you understand what I mean? How do you comment on that?
Опыта реального. Потому что с точки зрения фантазии, вот я сейчас рассказываю, как это выглядит, как будто бы решает проблему, если...
Because the way I tell you,
А на деле как?
it means that the soft approach doesn't work, but what in essence? Well, I would say that
По опыту, к сожалению, и поведенческие, и сигнатурные, и какие-то более высокоуровневые.
the signature and many other
Все имеют свои минусы.
level of machine learning approaches have their own advantages and disadvantages, and they may miss something.
Нет среди всего этого никакой серебряной пули.
Among all the tools, there is no silver bullet that might, or for instance, that we have listed all the rules, all the activities, and we have the team of analysts about 10,000. Such a content would be absolutely endless. If necessary resources are available, I think that any system could be cheated, any system could be penetrated through. We have to combine different methods. Obviously, what SOC works based on SIEM. These are traditional rules, behavioral and signature patterns, but if there is, you can put on top of that a logic that would process all that, and to do some scoring or anything like that, it would be only advantageous. So you have to combine the approaches. Alone, these things could be bypassed. I will support what has been said. This is a deeply entrenched defense tactics. I think that the question whether it makes sense to detect or not to detect everything is not very correct. You may miss something. So, once you need telemetry, if a detecting logic could be built on that, to do that, a signature and the mail and other techniques actually can be used there as well. You'd rather have an analyst spend more time, but we would be on the safe side. Don't forget about the work with false alerts, as I said, whitelisting and introduction of exceptions, asset management, prioritization of incidences, etc. Don't forget about that. And don't turn a blind eye on that. And the last question, probably, I wanted to talk to you about the final weapons we can use in order to ruin the detecting logic. But I forgot my question, but there is another question still I want to raise. I think it has already been mentioned, but let us raise that once again. I think in the context of detecting something later on, if we miss something in the beginning, you said that in order to identify the hacker, it is enough for us to successfully and verifiably identify at least one event which would attest to the presence of the hacker within the system. The defensive side. I think this might be an answer to many questions that we have discussed. Endpoint may miss something, and here we have certain things that would bypass the rules, and the system may do something a wrong way and miss something, let alone that it may even do it worse. But similarly, if the people at least somewhere manage to identify something, then you can just turn the table and identify the hacker. No, I don't think that this is the way it works. First of all, there is always a problem. We speak about the real world, not an ideal world where everything has been covered with the toughest audit, where we analyze everything. In the real world, we have, first of all, some blank gaps, some segments of the network where we do not collect any data. And I think not everyone is mature enough in terms of the inner SOC so that you could actually act retrospectively. In SIEM, probably, we don't have everything, and in order to act retrospectively, we have to get to forensic, to the lower tier. So I still disagree with what you have said, that it is enough to identify at least one malicious action.
Тебе что добавить?
Ну, у меня тогда встречный вопрос. Нам прям
Anything to add?
крутить всё? Вот прям иметь полную видимость
Well,
всего, что он
do we
делает.
have to have the full picture of what has been done by the criminal, where they penetrated, what they bypassed, to make sure that it has not been repeated in future? I think we have to know everything, so that the very next day the infrastructure is not encrypted just because they see that some data has been erased from one house, then they would say, okay, it's high time for us to encrypt the
Ну, смотри, тут,
host.
наверное, моя позиция,
Well,
в принципе, будет чуть совпадать с предыдущей. Я все еще считаю, что
I would share
проблема кроется не в
what's been said before.
скиллах хакеров, а в
I
недостатке
would echo what's been said before. It is not about the top-notch skills of the hackers, but rather this is about the deficiency of processing and the security
Мы уже
officers.
давно, наверное, пришли к тому, и либо кто-то приходит, кто-то уже пришел,
I think
что
that
в целом
we have already
взломать можно вообще все. Да, предотвратить все сценарии взлома невозможно, всегда будут и зероды.
came up with an idea that you cannot divert all the hacking scenarios. You don't have to fight against the hacking itself, but against the damage that can be done by the hackers. So it doesn't matter for us whether this is the first time hacker or this is the hacker who penetrated through the back door. If we can prevent damage, for instance, getting money away from our accounts or anything like that, we perform our function. If the criminal cannot do anything bad to us, something intolerable to us, then why we cannot say that we are performing our security function? And there is no guarantee that the criminal will not do that tomorrow, but there are no guarantees that we will fail to prevent him from that. So he would come back and we would deter him once again. He would come back again, we deter him. Well, I see that you are now full of control.